Everyone, stop!
I want to start off by saying I'm sorry to the victims, family, and the cause of their death of their family member. I'm sorry for all my actions that took in this place and in this courtroom.
Say first, I want to give my deepest and sincere condolences to the entire Zech family or anybody else that has been harmed, and that includes friends, family, distant friends, everyone who has been harmed in any type of way, shape, or form by this tragedy that occurred on May 7, 2023. I am so very sorry.
Across the way.
I never intended.
And then you have this little 5-6-year-old boy that scoots by on his scooter right underneath the fire, the gunfire. Whether by virtue of sheer dumb luck or the grace of God, that little boy wasn't harmed. And as to count 9, the court is going to order life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. And that will run the other counts that the court identified consecutive to each other. All of them will run concurrent to count 9. The court is going to order life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I recognize that that is not what the state is requesting. I recognize it is not what the defense is requesting. The court is required to sentence in a manner that provides a minimal amount of incarceration to the extent that is necessary.
It started with a chain, a simple piece of gold jewelry that a lonely 14-year-old boy named Parise Larry wore, hoping it would make him look cool, hoping it would make him fit in. Instead, it made him a target. The teasing from an older kid named Keyshawn Johnson was relentless, spilling from the apartment complex onto social media, a digital stage for a petty, escalating war of words. It grew into Instagram live streams, with Parise flashing that same chain, daring Keyshawn to come take it. "Let's go pipe for pipe," he boasted, holding a gun to the camera. It was all about pride, about a piece of metal none of them could actually afford. And it ended on a spring evening, with 20-year-old Tatyanna Zech carrying a bag of trash to a dumpster after a family cookout. She was laughing, thinking about her future as a hairstylist, her new life back home. She never saw the two boys in the hallway, their eyes locked not on her, but on Keyshawn across the lot. She never heard the argument over the chain that wasn't even there. She only heard the thunderclap of gunfire that erupted because of it. A single stray bullet, fired in a feud over a symbol of pride she knew nothing about, struck Tatyanna in the head. She fell to the pavement. A life of promise ended over a chain. What is the price of a piece of gold? For Tatyanna Zech, it was everything. Before we get into the heart of that dilemma, we have to understand the terrible weight placed on that scale. May 7th, 2023. A spring cookout at the Maplewood Commons Apartments in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, is winding down. 20-year-old Tatyanna Zech, a talented hairstylist who had just moved back home for a quieter life, helps clean up. She grabs a bag of trash and heads towards the dumpster. It's the last ordinary thing she will ever do. Because waiting in a nearby hallway were two teenagers, 14-year-old Parise Larry Jr. and 17-year-old Antonio Johnston. And their eyes weren't on Tatyanna. They were locked on an 18-year-old named Keyshawn Johnson, walking back from that same dumpster. The air was thick with a petty, stupid feud over a gold chain, taunts exchanged online, threats posted for the world to see. Parise, an 8th grader in special education classes, feeling the sting of ridicule. Antonio, a few years older, standing by his friend. Words were shouted across the parking lot. "Come and get it." And then, Antonio Johnston made a decision that would shatter a dozen lives. He saw Keyshawn had a gun in his waistband. He drew his own. And he fired first. What happened next was a hailstorm of panic and lead. Antonio fired 10 rounds. Parise, allegedly in fear, fired 3. Keyshawn, while running away, managed to fire 1 shot back. 14 bullets in total, turning a residential courtyard into a kill box. When the smoke cleared, 3 people were hit.
Keyshawn Johnson.
A man named Javier Rodriguez, asleep in his own bed, a bullet forever lodged near his spine. And Tatyanna Zech. A single, stray round struck her in the head. She was killed instantly. An aspiring artist, a daughter, a sister, gone because she took the trash out at the wrong moment. The investigation pieced it together. The social media threats, the fleeing to a school dumpster to ditch the guns, the flight to Chicago. Parise would turn himself in. Antonio would be caught months later. The physical evidence was grim, but inconclusive. The fatal bullet was too damaged to match to a specific gun. This detail would become a central thread. They were both charged as adults with the gravest crimes imaginable. First-degree intentional homicide, attempted homicide, reckless endangerment. Now, the law had to answer for them. Antonio Johnston, perhaps seeing the writing on the wall, chose a path. In January 2025, he pleaded guilty to all charges. He admitted he fired first. He agreed to testify against his friend, Parise Larry, hoping for a shred of mercy from the judge.
Have you been sentenced in your case yet?
No.
And are you hoping that as a result of this, the judge may take your potential cooperation into consideration?
Yes.
And after Exhibit 67, that proffer agreement, did you in fact enter guilty pleas to all 8 counts as listed in the agreement?
Yes.
So I want to talk a bit about May 7th of 2023 and the shooting that happened at the Maplewood Commons. Were you involved in that shooting?
Yes.
And did that shooting result in anybody getting hurt?
Yes.
Anybody dying?
Yes.
And were you personally involved in shooting a firearm in that incident?
Yes.
And were you shooting at someone?
Yes.
And who were you shooting at?
Keyshawn Johnson.
And on that May 7th, 2023 date, were you in the area of Buttermilk Creek Park?
Yes.
And who were you with in that area?
My sister, Parise, and a minor.
And when you say Parise, are you referring to the defendant who you've identified in court this morning? And on May 7th, 2023, you, I think, indicated you did have a gun?
Yes.
Did you have that gun with you at Buttermilk Creek Park? I'm sorry?
Yes.
And did anybody else have a gun with them at Buttermilk Creek Park? And who was that? And how do you know Parise, the defendant, had a gun with him there?
He flashed it.
And did the defendant say anything about Keyshawn Johnson as he was walking back from presumably the garbage area?
No.
And did you see if Keyshawn Johnson ever had contact with your group in the hallway?
Contact.
Were there any just yes or no words exchanged between anybody, Keyshawn Johnson and your group? And did the defendant say anything to Keyshawn Johnson?
Yes.
And what did the defendant say to Keyshawn Johnson?
You're always trying to bully somebody. Come bully me now.
And where was the defendant when he said that?
Inside the hallway.
And where was Keyshawn Johnson?
Approximately inside the parking lot.
And did the defendant say anything else?
No.
And where were you in the hallway area when this happened?
On the stairs.
And what were you doing at that point?
I was telling the defendant that it's cool, just chill.
And so what was the defendant's overall demeanor or attitude as he was saying that to Keyshawn Johnson?
He was kind of uptight and kind of weary.
You say weary?
Yeah.
What do you mean by weary?
Like kind of like having a chip on his shoulder.
And then, did you have any verbal contact with Keyshawn Johnson?
Yes.
And was Keyshawn Johnson saying anything to you?
Yes.
And how did you respond to what Keyshawn Johnson was saying to you?
I told him that you're always trying to bully somebody. Come bully somebody your side.
And how did you feel about what Keyshawn was saying to you?
Objection, not relevant.
Your Honor, I think it goes to the overall intent based on the words exchanged.
Good answer.
I was kind of sad
And why were you sad?
because he was saying things along the lines of F my family and things along those lines.
And was there anything particular about the family members that made you sad?
Yes.
What is that?
It was my cousin, DeAndre. He had just passed away not too long ago.
And what did you do in response to Keyshawn saying those words to you?
I told him for a second time that you're always trying to bully somebody. Come take something from me. That was referred to a chain.
And did you have a chain on?
No.
Did you end up with a chain in your hand or anything?
Yes.
And where'd you get the chain from? Parise Larry?
Yes.
And what did you do with the chain?
Around my neck.
Did you talk with the defendant about what happened in the shooting?
Not right then and there.
Was there at some later time that you did?
Yes.
And where was that?
On our way to Milwaukee.
And let's come back to that in a moment. And so you're at the Tyson Middle School area getting rid of the guns, and where did you go from there?
Went to like behind the Fond du Lac High School.
And when you say we, who are you referring to?
Me and Parise.
Was Tristan with you at that area? And when did Tristan separate from you?
Right after the shooting.
And when did he separate from you from this point at Tyson?
Maybe minutes.
And did you, so now you and the defendant, Parise Larry, are at the high school location, you said?
Yes.
And did you leave that location at some point?
Yes.
And would you be able to estimate how long you were there?
Maybe 20 minutes.
And where did you go from there?
Milwaukee.
And how did you get to Milwaukee?
We had a ride.
And who picked you up?
Corbin or Colton.
And did you know that person?
No, not really.
Did you contact that individual to pick you up?
Yes.
And how did you contact that person? And so then I think you said you were going to Milwaukee?
Yes.
And who was all in the vehicle?
Just me, the driver, and Parise.
And was it at this point that you've said that the defendant talked with you about what happened during the shooting?
Yes.
And did the defendant make any comments about thinking he shot anyone?
Yes.
And what did the defendant tell you?
He told me that I believe Keyshawn got hit.
Did the defendant tell you if he thought it was him, the defendant, that shot Keyshawn?
No.
And can you describe the defendant's demeanor in the aftermath of the shooting? And by aftermath, I want to be specific here. Let's just start with as you're running through towards the Tyson area.
Really nonchalant. He didn't really understand what was going on in the heat of the moment.
And then what about at the high school area?
Kind of nonchalant and didn't really understand what was going on.
And then what about on the ride to Milwaukee?
He was still nonchalant and didn't really understand what was going on.
And did you understand what was going on?
Yes.
And how did you understand what was going on?
I was hearing from
And I don't want you to say what other people told you, but just generally speaking, how did you learn what was happening?
through social media.
And what did you learn through social media?
Objection.
Hold on 1 second there, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead, Attorney Johnson.
The objection is hearsay.
Attorney Tony.
It's not being offered for the truth of the matter. It's through social media. He's responding to what he saw.
That's not relevant.
Well, the question, I believe, initially was how you learned, and now it's what did you learn? So the court's going to sustain the objection. Go ahead, Attorney Tony.
Thank you. After looking at social media, did you have any conversation with the defendant? And did that change his demeanor?
Yes.
In what way?
He was kind of in shock.
And then once you got to Milwaukee, did you stay with the defendant? And when did you separate?
I don't know.
Where did you go in Milwaukee?
I don't know. I went to a friend's house.
And what friend's house did you go to?
I don't really know his first name. I know him by social media name.
Or what was the social media name you know him as?
Re-up.
I'm sorry?
Re-up.
And a Glock gun that you had, was there any type of magazine on it?
Yes.
And what kind of magazine was that?
Glock mag.
And what type of capacity did it have for rounds?
31 shots.
And where did you get your gun?
Through a third party online.
And where did you get the...
No, excuse me, can you ask the question again?
Let me ask this. Where did you get the magazine from?
I got the magazine through a third party online.
And where did you get the gun, the firearm itself from?
I got it from a gun show somewhere in Wisconsin.
And do you remember when you got it roughly?
No.
And did the defendant tell you where he got his gun?
No.
And earlier you had said, going back to the shooting for a moment and what Keyshawn Johnson was saying to you, that it made you feel sad?
Yes.
Did you also say that it made you feel heated?
Yes.
And what do you mean by heated?
It made me mad.
And why did it make you mad?
Andre, he was my favorite cousin, and when he passed away, a part of me left as well.
The reasons you entered into this agreement is because you are hoping that Mr. Tony and the state will be lenient on you at your sentencing hearing, right?
No.
Well, that's a term of the agreement, isn't it?
No.
The second to the last paragraph reads, at the conclusion of all co-defendants' cases, the Fond du Lac County District Attorney's Office will advise the victims' families of your client's cooperation and advise any sentencing court of your cooperating, right? That's one of the terms?
Yes.
And you pled guilty in January of 2025, right?
Yes.
And you haven't been sentenced yet, right?
No.
I am correct?
Yes.
It's because your sentencing has been adjourned until after your testimony in this trial, right?
Yes.
Because you're hoping to get leniency from the state based on your testimony.
Yes. Sure.
Now, you talked to Mr. Tony and Detective Mylon about what happened that day, right?
Yes.
But when Mr. Mogren and I and our investigator tried to talk to you in September, you refused to talk to us, right?
Yes.
Why?
Because there's nothing positive that I can get out of it.
So I don't have anything to offer you.
No.
You promised to tell the truth, right, in your agreement?
Yes.
So why wouldn't you want to tell me and Mr. Mogren the truth?
I don't owe you guys that.
You don't owe us the truth of what happened that day?
No.
Do you owe the jury the truth?
Yes.
But you didn't want to tell us what it was before the trial?
No.
What color was Parise's gun, the one you saw at the park?
I believe it was silver.
How old is Benno?
No. I don't know.
Well, he's like 27, isn't he?
Yes, I believe so.
And he was your friend, right?
No.
What was he doing there?
He was a friend of family.
of your family.
Yes.
So you were the one Benno knew, right?
Yes.
Now, that afternoon, Parise told you that he saw Keyshawn Johnson, right?
Yes.
And he said he being Keyshawn Johnson, was, quote, on something, unquote, right?
Yes.
That doesn't mean he was on drugs or anything, does it?
No.
Means he had some kind of an attitude, right? That he was provoking you, correct? Did you say that when you looked around, you saw Keyshawn Johnson peeking around the corner?
Yes.
Peeking around what corner?
The corner of there was an apartment building on the other side of the hallway that we were at.
And that was before they went to the garbage can?
Yes.
Now, in your statement to the police, you said he supposedly went to take the garbage, right?
Yes.
What did you mean by saying supposedly?
I meant by supposedly where there were approximately 8 people that were going to the garbage. Now, from my knowledge, maybe 1 of 2 people would be reasonable to take out the garbage, but 8 people, no.
All right, so Parise told you that Johnson was on something, right?
Yes.
Meaning he was provoking people, right?
Yes.
You look out the door, you see Johnson peeking around the corner, right?
No.
How did you see him peeking around the corner?
By my mom's house.
Okay, you saw him peeking around the corner by your mom's house, right?
Yes, that was the first time Mr. Larry told me that Keyshawn was there, to my knowledge.
And that confirmed, in your mind at least, that Keyshawn Johnson was on something that afternoon, right?
Yes.
So you were worried about a confrontation with Johnson. You were worried he was going to try something. So you didn't want to smoke weed in front of your mom's building, so you went to the 868 building.
Yes.
And there was no discussion in the 868 building between you and Parise or any of the other people there that you were going to do something to Keyshawn Johnson, right?
No.
I am correct?
Yes.
There was no such discussion.
No.
Now, in your meeting with Mr. Tony and the detectives, you told them that while you were standing outside, it was Keyshawn Johnson who fired first, right?
Yes, I believed he fired first.
Because you believe that to be the truth, right?
Yes.
But that didn't match the truth that the prosecutor wanted you to say, right?
Correct.
And so they showed you the video again, right?
Yes.
And wanted you to say it was Johnson, it was you who shot first, right?
No.
But in the video, you couldn't see Johnson's hand, could you?
In the video, I couldn't.
And you told them, you're not looking at it from my perspective, right?
Correct.
From where you were standing, you could see that Keyshawn Johnson had a gun out, right?
Yes.
As he was approaching you.
Yes.
After you had said, come and see if you can take this chain from me.
Yes.
So you thought Keyshawn Johnson was about to do an armed robbery of you, right?
True.
True?
Yes.
And so that was when you raised your pistol, right?
Yes.
Keyshawn Johnson fired first.
No, I fired first.
But it was because you thought he was going to do an armed robbery or attempt an armed robbery of you, right?
Yeah, I just felt that he was threatening my life.
Tell us exactly what he was doing that led you to believe he was threatening your life.
He was walking toward me, and I told him not to walk toward me in that demeanor with the expression on his face and how he was carrying himself, like he was some type of macho man, or just like he was gonna strong arm me for whatever, after I told him to take the chain from me because I was older than Parise and I was stronger than Parise. So when Keyshawn approached me and I told him to stop and he didn't, I seen him take a gun from his waistband and he was going to raise it in my direction and I discharged my firearm.
In fact, what you said to Keyshawn Johnson was, if you take another step, you're going to force my hand.
Yes,
What does that mean?
you're gonna force me to do something I didn't want to do.
And Keyshawn Johnson took more than one step toward you, right?
Yes,
Which led you to believe he was going to harm you if he could.
yes,
That's why you fired.
yes,
You heard shots behind you at about the same time, right?
yes,
And there was no plan ahead of time between you and Parise or anybody else that this was going to be an ambush of Keyshawn Johnson and his group, right?
correct,
The only reason you fired is because he was moving toward you.
yes,
And you reasonably believed it was because he was going to attempt to rob you of the necklace, right?
yes,
In your statement to the state, you described Keyshawn Johnson as a non-friendly person, right?
yes.
What did he do or say that led you to believe he was non-friendly?
I had conflict with Keyshawn in the past with him and some of his friends on social media and things along those lines, verbal altercations with Keyshawn and some of his friends. So I knew that Keyshawn didn't like me. I knew that he didn't like my friends. I knew that he didn't like my family and people that I associate with. So I knew that Keyshawn was a non-friendly person and that he would try to harm me in any type of way, shape, or form.
You said earlier in your testimony that he said something about your deceased cousin.
Yes.
What did he say?
He said F my deceased cousin and F him.
And when you say F, you mean fuck?
Yes, sir.
Did your cousin die of natural causes or was he murdered?
No, my cousin was murdered.
How long before this?
Approximately 2 years.
Do you know whether Keyshawn Johnson knew your cousin,
No, he did not.
but he knew of the murder?
Yes,
You used a fake ID to get your gun, right?
yes.
Those are all the questions I have.
Attorney Tony, any redirect?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. When you pled guilty to all 8 of those counts, you didn't tell the court that you were acting in self-defense?
Objection not relevant.
Tony, any
It
response?
certainly is relevant on the cross-examination of what's been tried to be laid.
All right, overruled. You can answer, Mr. Johnston.
Yes.
You did not tell the judge that, correct?
No.
I think I'm asking the question poorly. I want to make sure. Did you tell the judge that you were acting in self-defense when you pled guilty?
No.
And you were just asked about Keyshawn Johnson saying, fuck your cousin who had been killed?
Yes.
And earlier you had said that made you angry?
Yes.
And then you came outside and drew your gun?
Yes.
And you've testified that you were then inviting the defendant to come towards you to take the chain
Yes.
while you were angry?
Yes.
And you've testified that you had your gun extended before Keyshawn Johnson?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Response, Attorney, or any follow-up, Attorney Jensen?
Did you tell the police during your interview that you were scared and that was the reason you fired?
Yes.
Is that the truth?
Yes.
No further questions.
Attorney Tony, anything else?
Just have one moment. In fact, you told them that you thought you might die in the gunfight,
Yes.
and that scared you?
Yes.
And that when you fired those 10 times, that was when you formed that intent to kill Keyshawn Johnson?
Yes.
Paris's case went to trial. His defense? Self-defense. He claimed Keyshawn Johnson drew first. He took the stand in now 16-year-old in an adult courtroom and said he only fired into the air. I just saw Keyshawn and Johnston pulling out guns, he said, and I was in fear for my life. But the security footage and witnesses painted a different picture.
The jury didn't buy it.
After just 2.5 hours of deliberation, they found him guilty on all but one minor count. As the verdicts were read, Parise Larry slumped forward in his chair, the reality of adult consequences finally landing on his teenage shoulders. Which brings us to December 19th, 2025. Sentencing day. The courtroom was a pressure cooker of grief and anger. Before the judge could even begin, the tension exploded.
Hey, you need to remember my words of caution. Okay, this is not, I gave everyone the opportunity to be heard. If you cannot conform to the behavior expectations I set forth, you need to leave. All right, stop! Stop! Everyone, stop! To say that I am frustrated and disappointed is an understatement. I started this hearing this morning with the warning about what I had hoped would not happen today, and it's exactly what happened. This courtroom should be able to be a safe space for justice to be accomplished for everyone involved. Now, you should be aware that people who were involved in the circumstances that took place before we broke for a significant period of time, there have been some arrests. There may be other people facing charges. If anyone so much as moves a finger out of place where I think it's jeopardizing the functioning of this courtroom, the safety of anyone in it, you will be removed from this courtroom. I had granted leeway this morning, knowing it's very cold outside. Everyone wearing a hat, take it off. Hats off. I'll wait till more people. I don't want this to fall on deaf ears with half the people missing. Hats need to be removed. That means the red hat. The red hat comes off. As I was saying, I was expressing my extreme displeasure with everything that transpired a few hours ago. I'm not going to play these games. I'm not going to have anyone's safety in this courtroom jeopardized. Do you think Tatyanna, any of the other victims, would have appreciated anyone's behavior? Do you think Parise appreciates anyone's behavior in this courtroom? I guarantee not. It is absolutely ridiculous. This is a court of law. I gave you a warning this morning. So any good graces that individuals in this courtroom have been provided, you've lost those. So, as I was saying, if there are any words that are mumbled, comments to the other side of the aisle that I think are inappropriate, if I hear anything, you're out. You're not going to be disrupting these proceedings. If there are movements that give me any sort of concern, you will be escorted from this courtroom. As I said, I gave the leeway this morning to have hats on given the weather. Hats need to be off. I already warned people about cell phones. I'm going to make that warning again. Cell phones need to be off, not silenced, not on vibrate, put away. I don't want to see it. If anyone in this courtroom, we've got obviously a lot more presence of law enforcement now. If anyone sees a cell phone, you can have that person escorted out of the courtroom. We're not going to be playing these games, as I said. If there are more problems in this courtroom, you may also face findings of contempt from the court. These are serious circumstances before the court. For Mr. Larry, for the victims who are involved, the fact that the individuals who are sitting in the gallery who should be here supporting their loved ones, whichever side of the aisle you may be seated on, have chosen to put their own selfish behavior and their inability to control their own actions ahead of that support is absolutely ridiculous. If there is anyone who feels unsafe leaving here today and would like to have an escort to your vehicle as you are leaving, please reach out to one of the law enforcement officers that are here. They will provide that escort. As I said, from the beginning this morning, I want to make sure that we move forward in a respectful and safe manner. Everyone should be able to expect that here in a courtroom, and you should be able to expect that as you leave. But I will be watching, my staff will be watching, the law enforcement officers that are now circling the courtroom will be watching. If any of the orders that the court just gave are violated, they will be escorting you out of the courtroom. Now, for the record, as the record probably got cut off as we were forced to end these proceedings very abruptly due to what looked like to be a brawl starting in the back of the courtroom. We were discussing, Attorney Tony had the floor. He was giving the state's sentencing argument. We haven't gotten to a recommendation yet, but that's where we left off. It's my understanding after things continued to occur in this courtroom, it extended outside the doors of this courtroom, it extended out to the parking lot. All of that needs to stop.
A verbal spat between the victim's family and Parise's family erupted into a full-blown brawl in the gallery. Hats flew. Punches were thrown. The judge, Wendy Levy, was forced to adjourn. Deputies swarmed in. One woman was arrested in the courtroom. A man was arrested in the parking lot. It was a chaotic, violent echo of the very crime they were all there to reckon with. When order was finally restored, the true emotional weight of the case was laid bare. Tatyanna's family delivered victim impact statements that left the courtroom in tears. Her sister, through sobs of anguish, addressed the boys directly. "You robbed her of life. I want her to haunt you for as long as you live your pathetic life. Was she still beautiful when she hit the ground?" Her mother spoke of a bright light, extinguished.
Your Honor, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts regarding the case involving the boys responsible for the death of my stepdaughter, Tatyanna. Tatyanna was more than a victim in a case. She was a vibrant, beloved part of our lives, and her absence has created a pain that will never truly leave us. I understand that they are young, and I know the court must consider that. But youth does not erase the gravity of what was done. Their choices were deliberate, and consequences of those choices will be carried by our family for the rest of our lives. Accountability matters, not from a place of revenge, but from a place of justice, responsibility, and the hope that no one else will be harmed in the future. I ask the court to consider the depth of our loss, the lasting impact on our family, and the seriousness of their actions when determining an appropriate sentence. Nothing can bring her back, but we hope for a decision that honors her life, acknowledges our pain, and reflects the value of the life that was taken.
You robbed her of life. No man should ever have that choice. She was ripped away from me 3 months before her 21st. To you, that's just a small celebration, but to us, it was a step towards her new life. She would have wanted me to let God handle it, but it's hard believing in him when people like you exist. You don't deserve to know anyone like her ever in your life. My sister was my protector, and on that day that you decided to kill her, I wasn't here to protect her. You took her life away. You took a piece of me away. I want her to haunt you for as long as you live your pathetic life. I hope you are never able to rest, as I cannot. You're a piece of shit, honestly. straight from the bottom of hell. I genuinely don't care what you've ever been through in life to make you take anyone else's. My sister had been through hell and back, and she never once in her life picked up a gun and shot someone. She will be more important in death than you will ever be your whole life. She will be remembered by generations of our family, and when you die, you will be forgotten with the rest of your scumbag family. When I got the news, I was at work, and my little sister called me, bawling her eyes out. And when she told me, I didn't believe it, because there's no way my older sister, the protector, was killed by a bunch of pussies. I couldn't understand. I laughed in delusion for the entire 3-hour car ride to see my sister. You seen her the last time she was alive, so I'm gonna ask you this. Was she still beautiful? Was her hair in those 2 puff ponytails that she always wear? What did her body look like as she hit the ground? Did she yell? These are questions I'll never have the answers to because I was 3 hours away. I cannot ask Tati because she's not here anymore. Because of you, she'll never have that family that she dreamt about forever. We can't be roommates how we planned. I just graduated, and we were going to live together very soon.
Thank you, Ms. Zech.
My name is Nicole Zech, and I am the mother of Tatyanna Zech. Before her life was stolen from us, Tatyanna was a bright light in this world. She was a talented hairstylist. She truly had one of the biggest hearts and would help anyone. I ask that when you consider the sentencing for these young men, you truly consider the magnitude of the life that was taken and the vast dark void that was left behind. We ask for a sentence that reflects the severity of our loss and the brightness of the light that they extinguished. Thank you for allowing me to share my daughter's story and our pain.
Then, it was the defendant's turn to speak. Parise Larry, facing a mandatory life sentence, stood. His words were halting, simple. I want to start off by saying I'm sorry to the victim's family. I lost a lot of my family members in Crossfire, so I know how it feels. And I'm going to take responsibility for everything that's in this case. Antonio Johnston, who had pleaded guilty, spoke longer, with more apparent emotion. I am so very sorry. I never intended to harm Tatyanna Zech. I just beg you, please just give me another chance. I am not a menace to society. He asked to be eligible for release after 20 years, promising he could be rehabilitated. 2 apologies. One brief and awkward, the other more fluent and pleading. The judge listened to both, but she had to look past the words. She had to look at the actions. Not just the actions of May 7, 2023, but the actions after. Reports showed Parise had been disciplined in jail for fighting, for sexual misconduct, even for passing an item containing fecal matter. Antonio, too, had violent conduct reports from jail. Their behavior behind bars spoke volumes to the court about their character and the concern for public safety. And so, Judge Wendy Levy began to speak. She acknowledged their youth. She cited the science of developing brains. She noted Parise's difficult upbringing, his learning disabilities. But then she methodically laid out the other side of the scale. She described the 5-year-old boy on a scooter who rode directly under the gunfire. She listed every victim, every life shattered. She called the crime as grave as it gets. For Parise Larry, she acknowledged he didn't fire first. But she stated his actions beforehand. The social media threats, the glamorization of gang life he admitted to, showed this wasn't just a spontaneous, panicked reaction. It was the culmination of a series of terrible choices. I am not willing, she said, to chalk everything up to Mr. Larry being a product of his environment. It's a factor, but it's not an excuse. Her sentence was absolute. Life imprisonment for first-degree intentional homicide, without the possibility of parole. The additional sentences for the other charges would run concurrently. At 16 years old, Parise Larry was sentenced to die in prison. Then, she turned to Antonio Johnston. She gave him credit for pleading guilty, for sparing the family a second trial. It's not often that this court sees that, she admitted. But she zeroed in on his role. He fired the first shot. He fired 10 of the 14 rounds. He lit the fuse. What credit can't do, Judge Levy stated, her voice firm. What taking responsibility can't provide is taking it all away. We can't turn back time. We can't bring Ms. Zech back. Her verdict was the same. Life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The state had even recommended a chance for release after 60 years for Antonio. Judge Levy went further. She removed the hope of release entirely. In the end, the scale did not balance. It could not. One life, brutally taken, could not be measured against 2 childhoods, now forfeit. The judge's dilemma had only one possible outcome under the law. She chose permanent consequence over the possibility of future redemption. She looked at the little boy on the scooter, at Tatyanna Zech's family's endless pain, and decided that public safety and the gravity of the offense demanded nothing less. Was it justice? Was it mercy? Or was it the tragic, final act in a story where every choice, from a taunt about a chain to the pull of a trigger, was a step into an abyss? The gavel has fallen. The sentences are life. But the debate over what we owe the victims and what we owe the children who commit monstrous acts, that debate is very much alive. This is true crime unraveled. What do you think? Did Judge Levy make the right, if heartbreaking, call? Or did she throw away any hope for rehabilitation by sentencing these teenagers to die behind bars? We read every single comment on our YouTube channel, True Crime Unraveled, and on Facebook and TikTok at True Crime Unraveled TV. Your perspectives fuel this community, so let us know your take below. If this deep dive into the difficult mechanics of justice hit home for you, please show your support, like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It truly helps us bring you more stories that go beyond the headline.
Until next time.
Then, Mr. Larry, if you wish to have me consider anything else, now is your opportunity. And just try to use that microphone so we can hear you, okay?
Yeah. I want to start off by saying I'm sorry to the victims, family, and the cause of their death of their family member. I'm sorry for all my actions that took in this place and in this courtroom. I don't really know what to say. I done lost a lot of my family members in crossfire, so I know how I feel. And I'm going to take responsibility for everything that's in this case. And I just want to say sorry to my family and to their family. Hope everybody could forgive me or what my actions took. And that's it.
Larry. It's a plethora of some of the most serious charges anyone could be facing. Not only did people die, or a person died, multiple people were injured, multiple people were put at risk of losing their life or otherwise being seriously injured. Attorney Tony referenced, I think for the first time today, I don't believe there was a reference to it other than in passing or if anyone was paying attention to the video that was played. The little boy. Don't know how old he is, looks maybe 5 or 6. Takes his little scooter, he's just out, looks like having a good time. As he's riding that scooter, he rides it directly under the shooting from Mr. Johnston and Mr. Larry. There's a lot of talk, and I'll circle back to this as it relates to Mr. Larry, of people becoming products of their environment. That little boy should not have to grow up thinking that type of behavior, that risk, these circumstances are in any way, shape, or form normal, because they're not. There aren't any charges as it relates to that little boy. I bring it up because it shows the seriousness of what took place here. It also shows quite clearly the concern for public safety that accompanies these charges that this court has. So when it comes to gravity of the offense, it can't get more grave than that. Now, looking at the character of Mr. Larry, he's very young. I cannot deny that. 14, I believe, when these circumstances took place. This court presided not only over the trial, but also that reverse waiver hearing. I remember both sets of proceedings. There is no doubt that the science referenced by Attorney Mogren is accurate. It matches with common sense. Anybody who may have a child, you recognize that that child's brain continues to evolve, to develop as time passes, as they gain more experience. So as Mr. Larry sits here, I have no doubt that he is continuing to learn, and his brain is continuing to develop, and he may very well be a different person 5 years from now. I think generally speaking, the research tends to show till about age 25, and even then, obviously, we all continue to learn from those experiences. So he's young. He has educational difficulties, as noted by the IEP and the ADHD. He does not have any criminal history. He does not have any juvenile history. I think there were some references to some citations, getting in some trouble at school, but nothing else that would show a pattern of this type of behavior. While that history is lacking, what's not is some of the evidence of behavior that he engaged in prior to the circumstances of May 7th. There was reference to, in the PSI, I think Attorney Tony hit on some of that today during the trial and the reverse waiver hearing. Mr. Larry had a significant number of concerning social media posts. Posts that involved a large amount of guns, some with extended magazines. The video that was played, that live feed, as I've already referenced, you hear him make threats to Mr. Johnson, and you hear him talk about going pipe for pipe. Even in the PSI, he acknowledges and talks about how his dad is his twin, I think to his dad's dismay. The PSI referenced that his dad did not want that life for Mr. Larry and tried to discourage any type of gang-banging activity. It's not my phrase, it's the phrase used in the PSI. But it references statements from Mr. Larry indicating he believed that life to be glamorous. Just pulling that out so that I don't misspeak. He felt he got to know his father and said, "That is my twin right now." He would look up to his father and cousins and always saw himself getting into those things. He was able to provide an example of him throwing up gang signs at his father, but his father did not want him to be like him. He says his father did the same thing, and gang banging with cousins a little bit, and the life of gangs and drugs was glamorous. His father used to punch him a few times and would tell him to stop doing things, but then felt his father gave up on him about it. He said his father did not discipline other than not liking him gang banging and swearing. He said he and father, I think it meant to be his father, were both not able to be controlled. Certainly a concerning statement. It's one that can be viewed a few ways. It's dangerous, shows someone that is on a path to making many poor choices in life, or can it be chalked up to youth and immaturity? So I fully recognize and appreciate the fact that Mr. Larry is very young. But those additional circumstances can't be ignored either. There were statements that were made that, well, when gunfire broke out, these were the circumstances. He essentially, based on his immaturity and his lack of development, fired back, right? He wasn't able, in the heat of the moment, to make the right choice that perhaps an adult could make. But as to that point, I agree with the state that this is not the only circumstance that the court's looking at in a vacuum. The issue of self-defense was put before the jury. They clearly did not find that defense appropriate, as they did convict Mr. Larry. If this was a circumstance where there was not prior action and he still happened to be guilty of possessing a firearm as a juvenile and had a gun on him, and circumstances just erupted and he acted, that'd be a different set of circumstances than the circumstances before the court today. The shooting itself is certainly something the court looks at, but I don't look at it in a vacuum. Mr. Larry had these engagements, trying, it appeared, to provoke some type of altercation with Mr. Johnson. He has these videos, these posts, in an attempt apparently either to brag to his friends. Again, it can be a sign of youth and stupidity. But it also shows that the circumstances of May 5th did not erupt of their own accord. There was some type of disagreement. And looking back, I presume everyone involved in these circumstances would consider it to be trivial. Whether it was a piece of jewelry, a chain, a piece of materiality that people were fighting over, or whether that chain meant something to someone. Whether it stood for something different, that I don't know. But there was testimony, there's certainly significant evidence that the beef that existed had to do with this chain. As there's a verbal altercation that starts taking place, it appears on May 7th that Mr. Johnston attempts to be the tough guy. Indicates that you're not going to pick on little Parise here. He's younger. You can pick on me. He pulls out his firearm, has it at his side. As additional steps are taken toward him, we don't have the benefit of that audio, but we see steps continue to be taken forward. I believe Mr. Johnston had testified that he indicated to Mr. Johnson that if he took any more steps forward, he would force his hand. Mr. Johnston fired first. It appears Mr. Larry in short accord after that, and Mr. Johnson gets off a round. All of this puts everyone else in that parking lot and people not in the parking lot, like Mr. Rosario Rodriguez, who's sleeping in his home, at risk. So I can't say that these circumstances are just one of a bad decision made by a young kid under circumstances that were incredibly stressful. It's a piece of it. It's not the entire story. I also am taking into consideration the argument made by Attorney Mogren as it relates to the facts and circumstances that were Parise Larry's life. It goes into what makes him him. So they are things that the court factors in as far as his character goes. But I'm not willing to chalk everything up to Mr. Larry being a product of his environment. That's why I had those follow-up questions. Because he had and still has a lot of things going for him. I can't think of a single individual, a single child who has the picture-perfect life. And I don't presume to be in a circumstance or a situation where I can put myself in Mr. Larry's shoes. It would be disingenuous to suggest that I could. But chalking everything up to one being a product of their environment and choices being forced upon him, I think that does a disservice to the many young men who put in the time and the effort not to surround themselves with individuals who may be leading them down the wrong path, who put forth their talents in school, who make the decision not to be another statistic. Certainly there are things in Mr. Larry's life, he wasn't surrounded by the right types of people. But you could see by some of those prior videos, he certainly was making a lot of his own poor decisions well in advance of May 7th. So it's a factor that is part of an explanation as to how he came to be the person that he is, and perhaps how he came to be in these circumstances. But it's not an excuse. I think there's been a lot that I've heard as far as remorse goes. I think the facts that were pointed out by the PSI writer, which is in part why I referenced that, those are facts. Mr. Larry did flee the scene. He did not call 911 to my knowledge. He did toss the gun in the garbage can at the Tyson Middle School, did flee, but he also did then turn himself in. So certainly some things that the court views more in a negative light, some positive character traits. The fact that he came and turned himself in certainly speaks in favor of some positive character and some good choices that he was able to make. But there are individuals who believe he's shown zero remorse for what's happened. I've read that in victim impact statements. I've heard that in the courtroom. I've also heard the opposite, that members of Mr. Larry's family, people close to him, believe that he is truly remorseful and have seen a real change in him. It's unclear to me whether he has been able to fully digest these circumstances such that he could show true remorse at this point in time. But I heard his statements today. He's indicating that he's remorseful. He's made an apology. I will leave it up to those in the courtroom who feel it necessary to have that validation, to interpret it as they will. I will take his words at their meaning and him at his word as he sits here today. So looking at the seriousness of the crime, as I've indicated, as serious as it gets, the character of Mr. Larry, we've got some things working in his favor, some things working against it. And looking at public safety, I think I don't hear there being a significant disagreement of how much these types of circumstances give the court cause for public safety. I think the issue is looking at a sentence, whether or not in the future we're able to address any rehabilitative needs for Mr. Larry such that that can quell the court's concern for public safety. Is this going to happen again? Is he going to harm anyone else? It's always easier said if hindsight's 20/20. I don't know that as I sit here today. What I know is he is a young man who engaged in very risky behavior, who engaged in behavior that took the life of another individual and seriously injured multiple other individuals. And since that time, I would say it is concerning as well, the information that this was listed in the PSI that the state pointed out, that he's continuing to engage in assaultive type behavior. Again, is that a product of his youth? Or is it a fundamental product of his character such that it gives the court additional concern for public safety? I think it's a little bit of both. So no doubt that the decision before the court is a serious one. It's not one I take lightly. It's a decision that will sit with me for the rest of my life. It is my job to evaluate those factors, look at the circumstances before the court, the evidence that I've heard come in, the background that has been able to be provided to me as it relates to the defendant and the various individuals involved in these circumstances. Weigh those in a way that balances those factors into a just sentence, one that is not any more serious than it needs to be. All right, I'm going to start diving in as it relates to the court sentence. And as to count 9, the court is going to order life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. And that will run the other counts that the court identified consecutive to each other. All of them will run concurrent to count 9. Mr. Johnston, and as your attorney apparently talked through with you, you don't have to make a statement, but if you wish to do so, now is your opportunity to let me know anything else that you'd like me to consider before I impose sentence today.
To speak now?
Now is that opportunity, yes. Just try to, if we could, make sure you try to use that microphone so I can hear you. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. First, I just want to say thank you, Your Honorable Judge Levy, for allowing me to address the court on my behalf. And as you may see, my family is not here in person to give a verbal statement on my behalf, but I just want to say first, I want to give my deepest and sincere condolences to the entire Zech family or anybody else that has been harmed, and that includes friends, family, distant friends, everyone who has been harmed in any type of way, shape, or form by this tragedy that occurred on May 7, 2023. I am so very sorry. I never intended to harm Tatyanna Zech, and I'm so sorry that she has lost her life. I know that I have never met her, but from what I have read from the victim's mother and sister and friends, that she was a wonderful person, that she, as was earlier stated, that she was a wonderful hairstylist and she was a very heartfelt person. I just want to give my deepest condolences to the entire Zech family. I am so very sorry that my actions led to Tatiana losing her life. I also would like to state that I am very sorry to the Fond du Lac community for acting so recklessly and not thinking. Me being 17 years old, I have been through trials and tribulations in my life, and I have been put in situations where I had to think, and that situation that occurred on May 7th was one of those situations that I should have thought and proceeded with my day, but my actions showed otherwise, and that is why I'm here in front of you today, Your Honorable Judge Levy. I really want you to take into consideration that I have entered those guilty pleas. I have took the stand against my co-defendant. I admitted my guilt, and I am so very sorry to the community and to the entire Zech family and anybody else who has been affected by this tragedy. They're not the only ones that have been affected. My life has been affected. Parise, Larry's life has been affected. Also his family and mine.
can take a moment. You have the floor until you tell me you're done.
I'm sorry. I'm not here in front of you with a piece of paper that everything could be fabricated about. I am speaking genuinely from the heart, and I understand that you have a job to do today. I just hope that you could be lenient enough and allow me to be released at or after the 20-year mark. I know you don't have any obligations to do so, but I really assure you that the time being spent in the Fond du Lac County Jail and my future would be in any prison or maximum facility, that I will be well rehabilitated and that I will grow as a man, and I am learning and I have learned from my mistakes. I want to end by saying this. I want to thank you again, Your Honorable Judge Levy, for allowing me to address the court on my behalf and giving my deepest condolences to the entire Zech family and everybody else who has been affected. And I am so very sorry. And I just beg you, please just give me another chance to show that I am worth it and that I am not a disgrace to society and I am not a menace to society, that after the time that I will have been served or being served, I will be well rehabilitated enough to come back into society and be a normal and respected citizen. I do have ties to Fond du Lac. I have a mother. I have a child. I have siblings. I have nieces and nephews that is here. And I'm just not ready to just be taken away from them just forever. I understand that I have to be rehabilitated for my actions, and I am admitting guilt. I have admitted guilt, and I'm sorry for that, but please just know that I am sorry from the bottom to the top of my heart of my actions that I have did on May 7th of 2023. And I just hope that the entire Zech family and everybody else that has been harmed in any type of way, shape, or form could someday forgive me, even though I know Tatyanna Zech would never be able to be held by them when she cries or be comforted by someone when they're down or speak to again. I'm sorry for that. And I know sorry's not going to bring Tatyanna back. I know sorry's not going to pay the price that needs to be paid. I know me asking for forgiveness isn't going to come with overnight. And I know justice needs to be brought forth so that Tatyanna's life being taken away from her has been brought to justice. Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to address the court on my behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. I'm not aware of that prior history as it relates to Mr. Johnston. However, there are separate aggravating circumstances that the court takes into consideration as it relates to Mr. Johnston's involvement in these circumstances. One, he pulled that firearm first. He had it down at his side. He's the one who fired first. He fired 10 rounds to Mr. Larry's 3, to Mr. Johnson's 1. Certainly, those are more aggravating circumstances than what Mr. Larry did, what Mr. Johnson did even. He then fled on foot, took off with Mr. Larry, And another individual dropped the gun in the garbage can by Tyson Middle School and fled the state. Attorney Sings pointed out some various ways that one could view that fleeing, whether it's going home to seek support and solace, whether it's trying to evade capture. I think the fact that he took off certainly showed some level of recognition that what he did was wrong. What he did was against the law. As Attorney Singh pointed out, I don't believe there was any evidence at the trial or otherwise that the actions of Mr. Johnston were premeditated in any way. So I take that as a mitigating factor in looking at the gravity of the offense. Gravity of the offense necessarily under these types of circumstances dovetails into public safety issues that the court needs to consider. Attorney Tony referenced these circumstances today. He referenced them this morning. The court referenced them this morning. It's something that I noted from the very get-go the first time that I saw the video of this shooting. I didn't hear the preliminary hearing, so I had not seen that video until the trial. You have Mr. Johnston standing outside the doorway. He raises his arm to shoot at the group of individuals. You have Mr. Larry shooting from the doorway. There's other people that are in the parking lot. There's people in the apartments across the way. And then you have this little 5-6-year-old boy that scoots by on his scooter right underneath the gunfire. Whether by virtue of sheer dumb luck or the grace of God, that little boy wasn't harmed. But I point that out because it is a clear, tangible circumstance that shows how dangerous these circumstances were. And that factors into the court's consideration of not only the public safety as it relates to this crime, but I also need to look at public safety in the future. And that dovetails into looking at the character of Mr. Johnston as to whether, based on the sentence structure put in place, based on the opportunities that may or may not be made available to him, that will he take advantage of them? Is he going to put others at risk in the future? Clearly, the behavior that happened here, the circumstances here, put many people at risk. Far more people than charges were brought in this case, because there was no charge associated with that little boy. And the people that suffered direct injuries or were part of that group taking out the garbage were not made identified victims in this case, but certainly were put at risk by the behavior and the actions of Mr. Johnston. In looking at the character of Mr. Johnston, I'll start by acknowledging that he too is incredibly young. 17 at the time, 19 now. He has not, I believe, have any prior criminal history, no prior juvenile history. Certainly that speaks to his favor. What doesn't are the conduct reports that Attorney Tony had referenced that are referenced in the PSI. Some of those do give the court concern as they reference a continued assaultive type behavior. This isn't just failing to follow the rules of the jail and you're getting written up. One references that he was throwing fist strikes with a closed fist to the other inmate's face and head area, continued fighting the other person at least 12 times. That was from circumstances in September of last year. Then from February of this year, getting into a fight again, striking another inmate at least 11 times with a closed fist. It states he then dragged them under the staircase and again attacked them, hitting in the head with a closed fist at least 5 times. Another reference from May 12th of this year. What started, it seems, as exchanging words, it says, with another inmate. It says he then struck the other inmate in the head with a closed fist. Now, I recognize the circumstances that Attorney Singh pointed out, and that is fair argument for the court to consider. But certainly what's before the court is very violent, assaultive type crimes, and I'm looking at how one conducts themselves so that I can have an understanding, as best I can glean, as to how they will take advantage of opportunities made available to them, how they will utilize their time in confinement, and whether or not that type of behavior is going to continue into the future. And so certainly looking at those circumstances does give the court some concern. Now, a lot has been talked about from both parties here as it relates to Mr. Johnston's character and his taking responsibility in this case. I give him credit for that. Absolutely. As Attorney Singh phrased it, I'm not certain I would phrase it the same. He indicated that Mr. Johnston stood up for Ms. Zech. Again, I'm not certain I agree with that phraseology. He certainly, after the fact, looked at his behavior and took ownership of that behavior. He entered guilty pleas acknowledging that behavior, which meant a trial did not need to happen. So as far as manning up and owning one's behavior, I do give you credit for that, Mr. Johnston. It's not often that this court sees that. And it was done in a manner that shows genuineness. I have no reason to doubt. I certainly believe Attorney Singh and take him at his word that those statements were made to Attorney Singh very early on in this case. For Attorney Singh to do his job, he certainly needed to review that discovery. The procedures as it relates to the court process needed to continue. So it's my understanding and my belief that you wished to take ownership for your behavior and these crimes from a very early time in this case, and I give you credit for that. It did spare some additional pain that victims' families would need to go through if this matter also went to a trial. And I do think, and agree with Attorney Singh, that the combination of that with some of the statements that Attorney Singh had referenced in his arguments show that you do have some certain level of insight into the seriousness of what happened here, the impact of that, not only on yourself, but on the lives of the other people that's impacted. Certainly, I think there is more for you to learn as you continue to grow and frankly get more experience in life. But it does show a certain level of accountability, and I do give you credit for that. What credit can't do, what taking responsibility can't provide, is taking it all away. We can't turn back time, right? We can't bring Ms. Zech back. We can't take the bullet out of Javier's back. We can't take away the injuries that Keyshawn has suffered. Those are things that the victims and their families will need to continue to deal with day in and day out for the rest of their lives. And you will need to deal with your understanding and your role in these circumstances day in and day out for the rest of your life. I don't envy either of those positions, but I too have a very important role in these circumstances, and the decision that this court makes is one that I do not take lightly. It is one that I will live with day in and day out for the rest of my life. I take my role seriously, and the sentence that the court imposes is one that I do not make lightly. I make considering all of these facts and circumstances, weighing those as I must through the light of those Gallian factors to provide as best I can a just sentence that factors all of those things into account. As it relates to count 1, the court is going to order life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I recognize that that is not what the state is requesting. I recognize it is not what the defense is requesting. The court is required to sentence in a manner that provides a minimal amount of incarceration to the extent that is necessary. I do find that life imprisonment without any opportunity at extended supervision is necessary here. It's necessary to address the seriousness of these offenses. I do find that that term of imprisonment is the minimum necessary to address the seriousness of these offenses and what has taken place